Oh, yes. My apologies.
Oui, Rémi, on vous entend. Et puis, ok, je me déconnecte. Au revoir tout le monde.
Right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Yes, it is 12:30. I'm slowly going to get started. We have our responsible AD, we have major participants, we have my co-chair, excellent. Who? Right, welcome to email core at IETF 113. From the list of people, I can see you are probably in the right room. This is just a reminder that you should be familiar with Notewell. One point specifically is a reminder to be professional and just be nice, be respectful, even if you're disagreeing with technical arguments. This is for the list of documents you should be familiar with. Again, IETF Code of Conduct. This session is being recorded. We're using Meet Echo. We have a note-taking pad. We will need a note taker, which is Todd, that would be great if you can take the notes. So yes, please. Maybe Ken, I can just co-volunteer you to fill in blanks unless you are speaking, if that's okay. Yes, my apologies. Is this better, microphone-wise? Okay.
Yes, much.
Okay. Sorry, I was just mumbling to myself. It's Friday. It's the last session in the week. I was getting ready for the session the whole week. I'm so overexcited and so overexhausted now. So, right, we have note takers. That's roughly our agenda. Most of the tickets are on SMTP, couple tickets on applicability statement at the end. And at some point, I'll just do a quick update on email format when Pete is back in the room. So I don't think we will have to use the whole 2 hours, but if the discussion is productive and we're making progress, that's fine. Is John? Oh, okay. I don't see actually John Clancy in the room at the moment. He said he had technical issues. Um, yes, Murray, I appreciate that it's 4:30 in the morning. So, um, right. So while we are waiting for John, I can quickly. I suppose I don't need Pete for this either. So basically, Email Core has one ticket outstanding, which is about printable versus visible characters. I will do a follow-up on this. I think there is a valuable proposal that will work. Basically, suggestion is just to say, instead of using possibly ambiguous terminology in various contexts, we're just going to say VCHAR character, which is um, effectively the intent of the text. Pete also has one outstanding change related to trace header, to which he agreed a couple of months ago. He just didn't get around to doing this. Once he pushes a new revision, we will be starting working group last call on it. So yeah, which hopefully will be exciting. That's the first working group last call in this working group. Um, with that, I would like to start on the main body of the discussion, but it's kind of going to be a bit hard if John Clancy is not here. So let's just give him a few minutes. I hope he is not right, running Windows and it didn't decide to update to Windows 11 or something, which will take a few hours. Um, hmm. So I'm actually, John Levine is volunteering to discuss his issues. I'm tempted to do the other way. Maybe we should start from the end of the slide deck and talk about enhanced status codes. Okay. Ken, sorry, I'm trying to Yes, reorganize the agenda a little bit while we're waiting for John. So let's start with your topic.
So I read the thread in the mailing list 2 or 3 times, and the summary there is what I boiled the issues down to, or at least my understanding of it, and came up with the following suggested text. I don't think it's worth my while to read it. You can all read it, and if there's any objections to that, I am more than willing to accept some text.
Okay, do you want to just give a very quick, sorry, I'm just quick background. So originally your document was saying must support enhanced status codes, and then some sort of implementation said, what does it mean for us? And yeah, so there was a bit of pushback from some implementations.
Yeah, in the original text actually said you must implement the spec that was actually the original registry for the code. So that was confusing. So this actually says it's recommended to implement the enhanced status code extension to SMTP, and then also refers to the list of codes in the registry.
Any comments? I mean, obviously, we still need to double check this on the mailing list, but I think that's kind of would be nice to see if people think we are going in the right direction. Okay. Sounds good to me. So, John Clancy, you're back. Hope. All right, so let's get back to our original. Right. Okay, starting from the beginning of list of issues, we have an old ticket 11 talking about possible clarification about mail transactions and transaction state. So John's original note was that section 3.3 would be improved if it be more specific about when mail transaction begins and ends, and what's part of the transaction. There was some updates to the document since the original issue was raised. I had a look at the text in this section, and I quoted the first paragraph of it, which I think talks exactly about what John was asking about. So it says, transaction starts with mail command, followed by one or more RCPT2, etc., and finished by data. There is a follow-up paragraph also talking about quit and RSET. So my suggestion is, it looks like this ticket is closed. John?
I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
As I've looked at this more, I agree with you. No changes needed. I think a small editorial twitch would probably improve things slightly, and propose the insertion of the word normal in that first sentence before SMTP and mail transactions as a slight improvement, but this is not worth a lot of time.
Okay, sounds good to me. If you can propose, can you write the proposal where to insert the word on the mailing list?
From my standpoint, I consider that a small editorial tweak for which we do not need to have a discussion, but it's up to you.
That's fine. I'm okay with that. All right, so tentatively, I will post a message. Tentatively, this is closed, subject to minor editorial tweak, which we'll see in next revision. Okay. Now, another ticket that arose out of our discussion at IETF 112 was IAN registration policy for SMTP extensions. Basically, the current document says as RFC 5321 that it's a standard track and experimental RFC approved by ISG. We have removed X- extensions, so they're not prohibited from being registered now, and I think it would be a good idea to register some of them, which raises the question whether our IAN registration policy is correct. So roughly on the following slide, there are two proposals. One is specification required, which is, as a quick reminder, this is expert review plus specification, which can be RFC, it doesn't have to be IETF stream RFC. Alternative proposal is first come, first serve with registration template requiring specification. So I'll show the next slide with the proposal. And we had some discussion on the mailing list. I think we'll have more discussion now about alternatives. So yes, let's have a discussion. Okay. John, do you want to say the first word?
Yeah. I don't know how many of you have managed to see the notes I sent to the list not too many hours ago. But I'm a little concerned about clutter here and vanity activities. And yeah, we've got some dead ones, but the dead ones seem to be reasonable at the time. So what I'm sort of feeling for, and I'm also concerned about the possibility of getting an extension proposal in conjunction with some special application that the expert reviewers don't necessarily understand. So I've been feeling around, and the comments on the list summarize some of it, and I've had some separate conversations with Murray about the possibility of creating a sort of in between here, where we don't quite require the level of approval the current text does, but we still do a community last call in which gives people who may have expertise that the experts don't, and this mailing list doesn't, to chime in on the thing if they see something that others don't. It's a much lower bar than requiring standards track, but it's a little bit more than allowing the MyPetRock extension.
So I think it's sort of like specification required with extra IETF list last call.
That's one way of looking at it.
Okay. Murray?
Yeah, we did talk about that, and I think that or what you have described here as new one are both palatable. We recently had a document come through that looked more like new 2, where it's first come, first serve, but there's some provisions around that. And BCP 26 doesn't really support it says that IANA will basically accept anything that's well formed if you say first come, first serve. Asking them to make a judgment about whether the reference describes a particular thing or looks a particular way is outside of IANA's remit. So I think new 2 might be a harder sell.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Barry, can I volunteer you to try to defend? Sorry, I sort of got Barry not.
Yeah, so I wrote this thing here. I'm okay with either of these options, specification required or first come, first served with a reference. The reason that I proposed maybe we should do the second one is that I wanted to really stress that we would rather have these registered than make the bar high to get the registration. Specification required ought to be a very easy level, but changing to that requires that we appoint an expert for this and go through that process, when really we'd just rather have people register everything that they're using. But we do want some sort of reference to say what it means. So I'm okay with either one we pick. We just need to have the discussion about which way we want to go.
Murray, do you mind if I insert myself before you?
No, go ahead.
My counter argument as a participant, I will be okay either way, is as Murray pointed out earlier, that IANA is not going to check names. So if I request an extension called My Shiny Balloon, it would be very hard to refuse and say, no, pick a better name or something.
But I guess my point is that if somebody wants to use one called My Shiny Balloon, why should we tell them not to? Who cares?
I think the way to resolve that is the clause you have here that says that describes the extension's purpose, format, and usage. If you drop that, I think we're good.
All right.
Because you're not asking IANA to confirm what's in the reference.
Well, no. So, okay. This text is for the person who's going to do the registration. All we're going to ask IANA to do is make sure that there's a reference and that it doesn't say chicken, 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 chicken. And beyond that, IANA is not going to do any checking. But I want the person making the registration request to know what we expect to have in the reference as kind of a guideline.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'll fly.
Yeah. And if we decide to go with specification required, I'm happy to volunteer as the designated expert who will basically approve everything. So, John?
I'm pushing back a little bit on, and I don't want to overburden IANA. I think we're agreed about that. And I think we're agreed about the principle that it's better to have registrations than to have things floating around which aren't unregistered. I'm concerned that over the years, we've seen attempts to extend things here done in various ways that are loony. And I'd like to be able to get enough community input in the process to help the authors understand where things are loony or where things won't work. I don't want to create a bar to registration in the sense the standards track thing does, but I want to create the opportunity for input and discussion at a more extensive level than the authors talking themselves, or the reviewers having to review something that they may not understand, even for whether or not there's a specification that makes sense.
Fair enough.
Okay. John Levine, do you want to comment on this? You commented on the mailing list. I just trying to get a bit more discussion. Yep.
I think I'm aligned with Barry here. I mean, I understand sort of that in principle there is a there's a risk that people might want to sneak horrible stuff through here. But given that we're not the network police, if they want to do horrible stuff, they'll do it anyway. So I would presume it'd be documented.
Yeah, again, if we could figure out a way to write first come, first serve after an IETF last call, I'd be happy about that. It's something we've certainly never done before.
Right.
But I do want to give people who are proposing these things the opportunity for community input.
Right. So my sense of for John Clenson, my sense of what you want is you don't want to block them from registering. You don't want to say you need to prove to us that this is useful. You just want to have them have the opportunity to have an exchange and get helped if they need it.
more or less, Barry, and the only qualification is that I'm inclined to try to require that because, as we both know from other contexts, the people who most need that help usually don't understand they need it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have sympathy for that. And I need to respond to the note that you sent to a few of us about that kind of how we could come up with a new kind of registration process that would help with that. So we can talk about that another time. But yeah, I have sympathy for that.
Pete, do you have an opinion? Sorry, I'm trying to drag everybody to the
Pete's
mic.
got his shoulders hunched over.
Pete Resnick, I'll repeat what I just said in the chat room. I have a leaning toward make this as close to first come, first served as we can do it. And I like the idea of some sort of documentation that gives people the ability to, you know, get some advice from the community if they want it. But really that, you know, this is not a closed namespace at all. And, you know, if people like Shiny Balloon as their, you know, as what they want to register, that's not going to do any damage to the protocol. So
I have a friendly proposal to my first friendly proposal. Maybe what we want to say here then is first come, first served, with the reference must also be provided describes this, and say it is highly recommended that registrants post to this mailing list and get feedback before they proceed with their registration. Something there that will encourage them to ask for feedback, but still allow them to just do a fast track registration if that's really what they want to do. What do you think, John Clemson?
I could probably live with that. I do think that the implication, I'm still hearing Marshall's voice, which is in the text. and the implication of needing to fast track one of these because somebody has come up with a brilliant idea, they want to get in the IANA registry right away, is an invitation to having to revise it later, for which we have no procedure at all,
right?
And generally creating a mess if anybody pays any attention to registration. Again, I don't want to do anything which will discourage people from registering, but I do want to try to find some way to encourage people to think about what they're doing. And we have all seen over the years in IETF, people come up with brilliant ideas, at least in their minds, which are so important that they should be deployed immediately, many of which are described as IPv10. But there's a trade-off there.
Yeah, or URIs that don't have colons in them or whatever. So
yeah. Precisely.
Yes. And we have proved that this has happened multiple times. Right.
You ready?
Pete?
Yeah, this is Pete again. I think I just want to address the fast track. I don't think that's the reason that I lean toward first come, first serve. It's pain in the ass, right? We want people who have something to register to not think, oh my, what a pain in the ass. Let's just skip the registration and start using it, which I think is what happens now. I don't think people really want, you know, it needs to be registered today. I think that's a very rare instance. I think the real problem is that people view it as a hurdle. And so we want to say there's no hurdle, you just register them, but please announce them here and, you know, get some feedback.
Okay. Again, as a participant, I'm sort of in between Barry and Pete and John. I think I would prefer for a registration request to be posted mandatorily to the mailing list, but but then have first come, first serve after the, 2 weeks period. This kind of quite similar to what we're doing with some media types.
So in other words, so you're okay with the idea that somebody posts to this mailing list, gets feedback saying your idea is really, really bad, rethink it, please, and they say, and register it anyway without paying attention to the feedback. That's my preference, because I'd rather see it if they're going to use it, I'd rather see it registered than not. But that covers John's concern that they need a way to get feedback, I think.
I can live with this, basically. I would prefer that people engage in the discussion, but if they say, well, that's just a thing that I just need to send one email and never have to read any responses, well, as you guys said, we're not police.
My other concern here, and it goes directly to the question Dave asked in the chat, is that we end up with a registration of something which seems to have something which looks like a specification, and then they discover it doesn't work and the specification changes and they don't bother to re-register it or to adopt the registration document, because that too is a pain in the ass. And I don't know that can be prevented. But again, if the community gets a chance to discuss the thing, it may be possible to get the thing improved a little bit, if possible, before the registration goes in and anybody tries to use it. And I'm not trying to set a bar here. I'm trying to provide an opportunity for discussion. If we take that much out, the other question for the working group is whether I should simply remove the text, which argues for minimizing extensions because they inherently cause interoperability problems.
Okay, Ken?
Ken Murchison. I think the bigger issue that we want to try to solve here is not having 2 different vendors start using a keyword at the same time without either one of them registering, and then there's eventually a name clash. I think that's more important than somebody registering an extension that ends up being technical garbage. Because as Pete said before, no one's going to use it, there's no interoperability problem. But if vendor A starts using foobar and vendor B starts using foobar and they do 2 different things, then we've got a problem.
Okay. Dave?
Good morning. It's 4:30 here, even though I'm some distance from Murray. The last comment goes to what I think is the only operational problem that has a serious effect. The general problems of posting stuff that's crap is their problem. The namespace will get a little noisier, but it doesn't actually matter. And some of the discussion has sounded like it's trying to create additional IANA policies. And my guess is that's not actually what's being intended, but rather the intention is to use an existing IANA policy, but add various items of advice to this document.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Well, that wasn't actually clear from the discussion, and putting in various commentary might seem like a good idea, but the more detailed that commentary is, the more opportunity, since this will be new text, the more opportunity there is for it to be confusing. And as an example of that, I'll point out that I was confused listening to this. If I was confused listening to this, what are the odds that somebody reading this in a document is going to think that this is a requirement rather than advice? So my suggestion is minimize the changes, address only the problem that is on the table, which is getting people to register, and don't try to quality control the registration process because if they want it to be used, they will come and get advice. If they are convinced in their arrogance that they know truth, they're just going to work around this. Don't add more text that is basically parental, even if it's good parenting.
All right, so my feeling of the room is that we're leaning somewhere toward first come, first serve, with some kind of suggestion about mailing list, posting to the mailing list.
Yeah,
And
I hear Dave's comment. I have sympathy for that too. So maybe what we want to do is introduce, apart from this text, somewhere else from this text, that there is a mailing list to discuss extensions and it's useful, and put that somewhere else that's not right here. So people don't think it's a requirement, but it's a place they can get feedback. I don't know. I'm designing on the microphone right now. So.
You added yourself and you took your, John?
John's on it.
Yeah, I'll repeat what I said in the chat, which is that if what we really need, then if the issue is making certain that people can register these things absolutely painlessly, one additional possibility is to allow immediate registration on request, which is very much like first come, first serve, and then give and then post something to a list, and give the authors 60 days to listen to whatever comments transpire, and at the end of those 60 days, the registration becomes permanent.
That's actually not a bad idea, I think.
Yeah, I could certainly live with that. Dave, does that address your concern, or does it fall into parenting?
That sounds like it's trying to create revised IANA procedures.
It doesn't, Dave, because after a careful look at the IANA procedures, and Barry can comment more on this than I can because he wrote them, but the IANA procedures do not require that any of those standard categories be used. It requires only that the procedure be clear to IANA.
Right.
That's correct.
And there are, in fact, some pretty bizarre twistings of these that people have used in various areas.
And we do
And they
have
work
case-
really.
Sorry.
Right, and they're a mess.
Sorry. So as you try to create conditions, you create opportunity for confusions. This is the problem with new specification. I thought the goal of the working group was to make minimal changes, not merely make whatever changes seem like a good idea.
Good point.
But Dave, this making any change here is a change, and a change which preserves some of the current properties of what the document says, while loosening the requirements, is a minimal change, and it's no less a minimal change than or no more or less than a minimal change than saying, well, chuck it all and go to first come, first serve.
Going to first come, first serve invokes an established process that is reasonably well understood. The downsides of doing that are also fairly well understood. As soon as we start adding more conditions, we're creating a new specification with more opportunity for misunderstanding and misaction.
But if we do what I suggested, more or less, the only complication is whether IANA can make a mark on their calendar and count to 60, or some other period which somebody picks. And per the IANA specification document, again, Barry can say more about this than I can. If IANA doesn't think they can count to 60 reliably, then they say, no, that doesn't work.
So, no, I think
Yeah.
what John has said,
There is in fact a queue, and I understand we're doing a little colloquy here, but I would like at least a chance to step in. I'm sorry. The mask. Mhm.
Right, Pete, then Barry.
This is Pete. I want to actually disagree with John on this. The simplest way to deal with this is do first come, first serve. And if we want some sort of IANA instructions and the IANA considerations that they announce it somewhere, that's fine. Putting a 60-day delay is exactly the kind of fence that is going to cause people to not register these things. And I think the amount of damage they can possibly do is so minimal that it should not be done. We should just simply do it first come, first serve. If we want to give IANA instruction that they should announce this such that we can interact with the person because they're going to provide an email address anyway and we can CC them on this, that's fine. That's certainly not changing the registration policy. It changes an IANA procedure, but it's basically an announcement. So I think we're asking for trouble if we're going to go away from specification required and not require expert review. If that's the decision we're making, then let's just go to first come, first served and make an announcement.
Okay.
there was actually something new in what Pete said that I'll follow up in a second. But what I wanted to say first was I think John is looking for something. Yes, John is trying to propose something that is very different. And what Pete said that keyed there is if instead of trying to put this on the registrant, we put it on IANA. We ask them to post to the discussion list. I think that helps. I think that takes the load away from the registrant. I have to agree with Dave on this, that there is no need to change this text at all. We can leave this as standards tracker experimental RFC specifically approved by the ISG for this purpose. And we did say we're going to make minimal changes. So that is the minimal change is not to change it at all. The next minimal change is to say, well, but this is really IETF review is really what this means. So let's change it to that. Even making it specification required is more than a minimal change. And making it first come, first serve with this and that tweak is a bigger change. So it depends how we want to go with changes. I am fairly ambivalent on it at this point.
Okay. I'm going to lock the door in this room and nobody leaves until we make a decision. Remote people have a slight advantage here. They just run.
I think the path of least resistance is to go with specification required and have somebody review it. But it doesn't have to be the IETF reviewing it.
Works for me, personally.
This is Pete. My only concern about specification required is I don't think it significantly changes the barrier that the current text has such that we're going to solve the problem.
No, it does actually.
I understand the difference between the two, but I suspect that anybody who is unwilling to even do an experimental RFC, just submit the draft, is not going to do specification required.
Yeah, but specification required can be you post something to your blog.
Right.
This is doing an RFC, even if it's through the independent stream, is more of a burden. So, Dave.
So in response to Barry, my question is, so what?
So what on which?
You were laying out possibility of some, let's call it casual behavior, which might have some challenges in utility. So posting to a blog might or might not actually be useful. And so they register a name and they only post to a blog. And gee, that doesn't work very well. Let's just take that case, which is what I assume why you mentioned that as an example. To which my response is, so what? Their option perhaps isn't useful. So what?
Yeah, that's basically what I was saying. I'm agreeing with you there, yeah. No, what I was saying is that as opposed to having to do an RFC, which is what they have to do now.
Which
let them post to the
is,
blog.
oh, okay. I thought you were raising it as a worst case, an example of a worst case scenario.
No,
It's
an example of an easiest case.
So specification required is an entirely reasonable barrier, but it's a very high barrier. If we're trying to lower the barrier, then get rid of the damn barrier.
And that's why I proposed first come, first serve. Yeah.
Right. Sorry, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I'm just pointing out, though, that first come, first served is a significant change. And if we're really looking to make minimal changes to the document, we have to consider that. So,
Okay. Hans-Jörg, who was patiently listening to our bickering all this time.
Yeah, hi, this is Hans-Jörg. Indeed, I might probably have a little bit of an unpopular opinion here. So I was wondering for myself for quite some time, actually, with any IANA registry, that I'm not really sure if this is a core part people use a lot, actually. And, you know,
They do, yeah, they do.
I'm
Wow.
wondering, actually, I mean, I totally understand why this discussion sort of is necessary. However, I'm wondering a little bit, like, we are discussing here something for quite some time now, which actually is probably not even such a big deal, because just not so many people will actually ever register something here. I mean, one could argue because currently the policies are too strict, but I'm actually sure that's not the point. The discussion, in my opinion, rather should be on a much more meta level, maybe, like, you know, how in general could IANA registries made more useful for users of the services, and doesn't that kind of stuff need redesign overall? I know that it's probably too big of a topic for you right now.
It's probably out of scope
but
for
that's
us.
why I said it's an unpopular opinion, maybe.
Well, so I guess the point here is, and I have no data, and so I'm just sort of groping, but it may be that people who have cockamamie ideas that are not really useful are deterred from putting them into their stuff by having to do an RFC, and they can't do an RFC because we're never going to do it. We're never going to approve an RFC that has this bad idea. And so they don't bother at all, and they just don't come with it. And if we made it easy, they would come with it and put in a lot of stupid ideas. I doubt that that's going to happen. I'm not really expecting that if we just said first come, first serve with no restriction, I'm sure we're not going to suddenly get 300 requests for bad ideas as SMTP extensions. Okay. But maybe John has some data to refute that, or Dave's next in the queue, actually. So. Dave?
Sorry, I was distracted being too clever responding to Medico, so I didn't actually hear what you said.
Do you mean to be in the queue, or?
Oh, sorry.
Your hand is up.
No,
okay.
I thought that Barry was asking me a question, so I was trying to respond.
No, I just saw
that I
your
couldn't
hand is
answer. Sorry.
Right. I can think probably of 4 documents that this will affect right away. 3 of them are X extensions in some common use, published by SendMail and others. 1 probably fall into the bad idea category. I don't know if it helps us, but
I'm perfectly.
So I can see that both there are things that are not registered because of current registration procedure, and I can also see some cases which might or might not be registered depending on which bar, which
Right.
level we pick, basically.
And I'm perfectly okay with seeing a few bad ideas come in and get registered, but I wouldn't want hundreds. John,
I think we're spending far too much time on this discussion than
Yeah.
it is worth relative to the rest of the agenda. And we either take this to the mailing list or drop it and adopt the principle of minimal change, of absolutely minimal change, which I would oppose as well. But I think we're going around in circles right now.
yeah,
And the fact that I'm having trouble hearing speakers who are speaking almost next to the mic rather than into the mic doesn't help much, but it's just an added aggravation. We're spending too much time on this.
Okay, so yeah,
just doing a mic check. Is this mic any better for you to hear from, John?
No,
Okay.
about the same.
And I'm right now, I'm right up against the mic, so.
No. As I said, it's about the same. I can hear you, Barry, when you're speaking close to the mic and clearly. I've had trouble hearing other people who are a little more trouble hearing other people, but it's still very faint.
okay. Right. Barry, I will delegate you to follow up on the mailing list on this.
I will do that.
Gosh, you can just never predict which topic is going to be easy. I thought this one will be easy one, so you better help me out on the next one, please. Oh, by the way, so John had technical problems, so he was late. So I talked about this already. So yes, thank you, though. All right, moving to the next one is one of the issues that John Levine raised was about verify being required command and observing that a lot of implementations either don't implement it or just have a stub implementation. So one thing that we sort of discovered while researching this issue is that verify actually can be a capability and emitted by some MTAs. It is, however, not registered with ANA, which probably should be fixed. So basically the question is, should the document either say that verify may be implemented but is not required, or alternative, we can just keep verifying the document and say if it's implemented, then you have to emit verify capability. Thoughts, comments? John Levine? Yep.
In the interest of minimal change, I would say leave it in and say it's just leave it in and require it, since like I said, if you don't want to actually provide a useful answer, you're allowed to do a stub. In my poking around, it appears that in fact everybody does just do a 252, so that would also match existing practice.
Okay, so right.
Yeah, and
Maybe the sentence saying about the stub implementation then, or is it?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think it already allows a stub. I don't remember where the sentence allowing a stub implementation is. It may be okay already. Oh, wait, in the AS, yeah, the AS could say, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the text quite allows the stub implementation. There is
And this-
certainly text saying that verify should spend more energy trying to verify addresses than RCPT2 does, which kind of the opposite of what we are proposing.
I guess compared to
Add
what
yourself
5.3
to the queue, and
yeah, all right, yeah.
You can add me to the
I'll-
queue and then take me out.
I can't. John?
Yeah, just remember too that we've got enough loopholes in 5321 even for not doing things if they don't seem sensible or don't seem operationally reasonable or seem insecure. That an implementation or configuration which doesn't feel like supporting verify simply leaves it on the hello list and moves on. So one can not implement this while implementing it or something like that. That's an argument for no change.
Yeah, so maybe I think what we are, it seems like it would be nice to add some text to AS, but maybe the base spec doesn't need to change. Is it roughly what I'm hearing? Or maybe not at all? John, would you like, do you think we should have some text about verifying in AS if we don't do a change to the base spec?
I think if people want to, we can clarify the existing rules a little bit because it's convoluted and the different sections, I believe after trying to review them, say consistent things, but it's very, very easy to read them in ways in which what's said is not consistent or is even contradictory. So that may be a little, may need a little straightening out, but I don't think there's a strong case for making any substantive change here, like try to deprecate the thing.
I know what you're saying.
Okay. Pete was in the queue and he said what John said. Todd?
Yeah, just to clarify the earlier bit about stub appearing in the spec or not, the word stub doesn't, but in section 7.3, it speaks of if a site disables these commands for security reasons, and one of the commands is verified, the SMTP server must return a 252 response. So that kind of speaking toward the stub topic without actually using the word stub.
All right. Yeah. Fine. Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is, or what I would like to propose is no change in the base spec. If people want some extra explanation in AS, we can discuss this on the mailing list. The separate minor issue about verify capability, we can just take this directly to IAN, I think. John?
Do you want me to go through and see if I can suggest clarification and editorial cleanups to this
Yes,
collection
please.
of statements about verify, or should we just let that go?
I think it would be useful. There might be like 3 sentences in different part of the document that might look contradictory, but maybe you just need to cross-reference saying this is what typically is done, but look at X.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that would be useful.
My guess is it'll be a few words here and there and maybe some cross-references. But let me make a proposal on the mailing list.
Okay, sounds good. Right, moving on. John Levine raised another question about what is restricted capability client. Section 3.3 has restricted capability client must not assume that any SMTP server on the internet can be used as their mail processing relaying site. So I think it's a valid question. What is meant by restricted capability client? Also, depending on what it means, if this is talking about open relays not being a good thing, then maybe the text is misplaced and should be moved. John Levine, would you like to talk more about this one?
I think I would, I didn't understand what restricted capability client meant. And I just, if it means like the example I gave is my printer, which sends notifications to one address. If that's what we mean by restricted capability client, then the advice is fine. And maybe we should define restricted capability client better. I thought it meant an MUA that knows how to send mail to anybody, but doesn't know how to find an MX, in which case then the advice is kind of wrong. So I guess,
Right.
yeah. So my preference is just to be a little clearer about what we mean by a restricted capability client.
Pete?
Yeah, now that I read the sentence, do we just mean clients? I mean, no client should assume that any SMTP server on the internet can be used as their mail processing relaying site.
Well,
I mean,
and then
I
if it's about
understand-
open relays, then it's in the wrong section.
I think that's what that is referring to. I mean, it's, you might not be able to get to an open relay. You might not be able to have something that acts like a submission server. Not every SMTP server on the internet can be used as a mail processing relay site. Unless someone thinks we meant something different there, and I mean, maybe it should be moved, but
basically you're saying drop restricted capability.
yeah,
just leave
we're not
client.
saying anything magical there as far as I can tell. I'll go reread the context, but
Okay.
I think it's just clients.
John?
The first observation is that as the several exchanges between John Levine and I indicated, probably indicate this text is confusing and horrible. And in my defense, I didn't write it. I was told to put it in. And we certainly need to clarify it. One of the clarifications is that it was this sentence and a few others that caused me to raise the question as to whether we wanted to switch back to SMTP sender rather than and SMTP receiver rather than SMTP client and SMTP server, because I think this text was intended to talk about SMTP clients, not MUAs, and that immensely changes the meaning of what's going on here, although it still doesn't make it clear. And again, the note I sent in the wee hours of the morning about this may at least clarify what the problem is, if not what the solution is. And I have no opinions today beyond that.
Okay. Dave?
So as I posted, there's sort of two different lines of thinking that can go with this text. The first is, do we know of existing operational problems being caused by this text? I think the answer is no. I think that the concerns being raised are by the static reading of the text and thinking about it rather than having reports. That argues against making any changes, given the nature of the current working group effort. That said, there are problems with this text. First of all, the idea that software makes assumptions doesn't make any sense, which invites confusion about this. The second of all, this actually is not text that is operational. It isn't specifying a meaningful action or prohibiting. It isn't meaningfully prohibiting an action that makes any sense. And that argues for just dropping this text completely. because we don't seem to know of what problem this is the text is trying to solve. We've just had several people make some guesses about it, but we're not sure. And so if the text is confusing, which it clearly is, dropping it in the absence of knowing what problems it's fixing would actually be the simplest thing to do. Leaving it, given that we don't know of field problems it's causing, is the other choice. So dropping it or keeping it make the most sense. Changing it does not.
Okay. Speaking as a participant, I would be in favor of dropping it. John?
Feel really strongly about this, and I will drop it if people tell me to drop it. But I am reluctant to remove text that the drums or Yam, I don't remember which one at this point, put in without understanding what that was intended to say. So I would argue for clarification in preference to dropping if we can figure out what that clarification means. And I think clarifications are clearly in scope.
Okay.
And I
Todd?
have offered a hypothesis about what it means.
The text from 5321, we've omitted one word from this sentence here. The sentence actually starts with the word consequently, and it is contextually, it is sort of talking about open relays. So that may inform any future direction we take on this text. It doesn't just say restrict capability clients must not assume. It says, the prior sentence is restrictions may make a server useless as a relay for clients that do not support full SMTP functionality. Consequently, restricted capabilities must not assume that any server on the internet, whatever. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, Todd, I think it's still a lousy construction, but indeed, when this is taken in context with the associated text, it makes some sense and actually gives a clue as to what restricted capability was intended to mean. So a very small amount of this problem is that the text has been quoted repeatedly out of context.
John said that it looks like this text was quoted repeatedly out of context because the previous sentence is not quoted. John, can you suggest a clarification to the sentence? John Clancy.
In real time, no.
No. Yeah, I'm like in the next week or so.
Let me try to do that next week or so, and if the other John wants to have an off-list conversation about how that text should be written, I would appreciate it. I would also appreciate, for your edification of mine, if you would clarify how his last name is pronounced before we get completely confused.
Okay.
Pete?
Yeah, I asked in the chat room, John, you indicated that if we can figure out what this means, you'd prefer to clarify it. What if we can't figure out the history of this sentence? Would you be more inclined to drop it or more inclined to just leave it there and ignore it? And anyone else can answer as well, but I'm curious what your particular take on this was.
My prediction, especially when one looks at the context of this half sentence, is that we will be able to figure out what it means. So I hope your case is entirely hypothetical. Having said that, If we can't figure out what it, if we cannot make it clear, then I prefer dropping it than leaving it there.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I think that's probably the best way forward is John will propose a clarification. If we can agree on it, great. If not, if it generates lots of other discussion and confusion, then we'll just drop it.
I do think, however, that the condition for that is that everybody make a good faith effort to read whatever it is I write and then see if we can either fix it or agree, rather than not agreeing in order to take it out, in order to take this text out. And that was the reason I was a little bit reluctant to answer Pete's question.
Yes, absolutely. Everybody should always act in good faith. Are you joining the queue, Pete? No.
No, that was me left over.
All right. Okay. Okay. Moving on. To the next issue that I would like John and John to discuss. This is around null-MX and some terminology. John Levine?
Oh, here I am. No, here I'm not. Did you put in the other slide that I suggested about this?
Yeah, there is 2 slides.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so the question is, yeah, we have a host that handles mail for, yeah, so here's the setup. Mail.example.com handles mail for example.com, but not for itself. So if someone addresses a message to mail.example.com, what should it say? And as the next slide suggests, we have 2 competing answers. One is 550, which is what it normally says, and the other is 556, which says it's a null MX. And while I don't think 556 is wrong, I also don't think it's realistic. I think in my experience, mail servers know what domains they handle and they know what domains they don't handle, but they don't know why they don't handle other domains. So this basically would require every time a receipt 2 fails, it's got to do a null MX lookup and say, oh, I know what's going on there. And it's actually, it can be surprisingly complicated because it is not rare for mail servers to have 100 different names. I mean, like at MicrosoftOutlook.com, the mail server has a name, has a name for every domain that it handles. So there's a lot of possible looking up there. So my inclination is I think not to change anything, and 550 is the normal response for not our mailbox.
John Clancy? Actually, just both stay in the queue and just you're the people who seem to understand the issue. I to be honest, I was a bit confused.
I want to agree with John on 2 things. One of which is that this gets rapidly, and the other is that probably we're better off just leaving it alone.
Not going to disagree with that.
Sorry, did you just suggest no change, basically? No change to the document. Okay. Okay. Moving on. Right. This and the following issue is actually slides are now out of date because discussion on the mailing list moved on a little bit, but we don't have a proposal text. So this is basically clarifying about when, like how blind copies and RCPT to work, and also when the for clause in the received header fields can be inserted. John Clancy, you had a proposal you would like to pursue?
I think this needs some cleaning up, and I don't know whether it's best cleaned up here or in the AS. I think the minimum change argument argues for the AS, but that would still require some changes here. And I outlined several cases. Partly the complexity here is that the statement discussion of blind copies, which I of course wrote, so it's my fault, is itself problematic, because an SMTP server which is following the rules has no idea what's a blind copy and what isn't, and this gets inexorably tied up with for, and I think what I've said on the mailing list is probably more articulate than what I can say this morning.
Right. So you propose to have a look at this. I suggest, so firstly, I talked to Pete and he was happy to help you out with this, if you like his help.
I always appreciate constructive help, and Pete's help is always constructive.
Okay, so Pete raised thumb up. You will have a look at this text, suggest clarification, or things to delete, things to add. I think probably the best way is just you suggest set of changes. We'll review it on the mailing list, and then we decide which one goes into base spec, which one goes to AS, if any.
Works for me.
Okay. Again, if we can get this done within a couple of weeks, that would be great. I think we need to do some kind of aerobic exercise in the room. Everybody is sort of like, come on, exercise, jump up and down. Well, they already had so much coffee that, right, trying to get through the rest as energetically as possible. This is a follow-up on the discussion we had at the January interim about the text, which seems to prohibit list exploders to add any header fields. I think where we landed with this on the mailing list, there are 4 options. No change. Remove the set, and in option 1, the sentence under discussion is actually listed. Second choice, remove the sentence. Third, replace it with this change to mail from doesn't affect the header section of the message. Fourth, this change, replace it with this change to mail from doesn't affect the header field that is already present in the message. I don't want to have the whole discussion all over again, so I think John and I are happy with choice 3 and 4. If people have any strong objections, If people have preferences for either 3 or 4, maybe we can have a quick discussion here. Barry said 3. Ken says whatever. Peter's shaking his head as well. Okay, and the winner is number 3. Realistically, number 3 and number 4 is kind of so close that I don't think it matters. In absence of any objections, I think, John, please implement change number 3, and I can close this issue.
Sorry, I was distracted by an emergency telephone call. The only advantage of 4/3 is that if there was some weird case, which so far nobody's been able to identify, that that would cause somebody to want to put a trace or other sort of receipts, other sort of fields into the message that indicated what was done here, 3 prohibits that, probably. And 4 does not, except that 3 is, except that there's already text there that says you cannot change any header fields which are already in the message. So they're I guess you write me down as indifferent, and if the consensus is 3, I'm happy with it.
Okay, Barry?
Yeah, this is Barry Leba. The way I read this is the text that isn't quoted that comes before this just says you have to do this stuff to the mail from.
Yes, you
And
change the mail from.
The only thing that we need to say is, and we're just talking about the mail from here, it does not affect the message headers. And that's the straightforward thing and that's why I prefer 3. I don't mind 4, but I think 3 is all we need to say, and it's less confusing than anything else. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay, okay. So what's that?
Dave had a question in the chat room, in the Jabber room, whatever. So, but okay, I'll let you.
Yeah, this is Pete. To answer Dave, yes, I think the reason we need to say something here is because people have had trouble with this. People think that changing the mail from means that they have to change the from field in the message, which is a bad thing. And this clarifies that we only mean changing the mail from doesn't affect the message header in any way as far as instruction goes. There's an instruction here that we're going to be leaving in, which talks about changing the mail from, but that doesn't affect the header section. So I think this clarifies and doesn't change what's currently in the text. It just clarifies the meaning of what's in the text that people have screwed up in the past.
Yeah, and adding to that, the reason we want to make some change to this is that some people have interpreted the message header section must be left unchanged, is that you're not allowed to make any other unrelated changes to the message header if you're a mail exploder. And we want to dissuade them that we want to make it clear that we're not talking about that at all.
Yeah. Dave?
So I'll repeat the point. Mailing list exploders are acting long after mail delivery. They're creating a new message and they're posting it. So the problem here is much deeper than this bit of text fixes. The idea
Yes,
that
but we have a separate ticket for that. We have a separate ticket about mail exploders, which I postponed because Ned is not here. you're right, we need to do some other changes, if that's where you're going with it.
So to apply the point here, that says option 2, remove the sentence. The sentence is, I mean, this is sort of beyond layer violation, since it's 5321 talking about 5322 topics. But it's sort of beyond that, in that it's trying to fix a problem with something that's completely out of scope for this spec. The fact that historically it was in the spec at the time was there weren't really meaningful choices. We're 30 years later.
Yeah,
For what it's worth, I could live with 2. I think 3 adds the clarity that we were trying to get to, but I could live with 2 as well.
okay. Right, let's just go ahead with 3 and be done with this one. Right. Right. So Peter's saying if we're going to discuss aliases and mailing list clarification. So there is a separate ticket for this. We were supposed to discuss it, and Ned was supposed to propose some text or possible document, but he got delayed. So we are going to do this later. So how much time do we actually have left? Half an hour. I'm going to mix up things a little bit because I am in the front and I can. Todd, do you want to do a quick recap of your slide?
Sure. I've posted several revs of proposed text to the list since January. The most recent was earlier this week, incorporating whatever comments had been made after the interim. Alexi made a few minor comments. I have incorporated them in my working document, but haven't posted them to the list or in the ticket or anywhere. I would encourage people to look at the list and give it another pass when they get a chance. Let me get you the proper, or the actual subject name here so that I can find it in my threads. The subject is ticket number 54, authentication and encryption for AS Rev 4. So if anyone wants to take a look at the list and make some more suggestions, I appreciate it. But that's really, I'm not going to sit here and read the text to everybody today. Pete,
Right.
you have your hand.
Sorry, I missed that.
Pete seems to be in the queue, but I don't see him
Okay.
on camera at the moment.
Right. So let me make a proposal. Maybe we have a couple of, maybe you can post the latest version. We'll have a couple of weeks of comments, and then if there are no further comments, then Ken just can incorporate the text.
Okay.
It's like one big section with subsections, you know, so, but I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Ken loves text already written for him. Sounds perfect. Okay, are you ready? Are you ready for the last ticket of the day? Are you ready to, can I get your commitment to be productive? Okay. Right. You can see why I didn't want to do it earlier. Right. John mentioned some of it earlier on in relationship to other ticket. Basically, question is whether existing use of MTA is sufficiently defined, whether we want to use sender SMTP and receiver SMTP instead of SMTP client, SMTP server. Okay. And the next slide is definition of MTA. I wrote this slide a long time ago. My proposal is to do no change, but you know, if we can get some useful discussion out of this topic. John?
There's a small interesting complication here. And I think some of it is changes the working group told me to make this time around, and some of it may have crept in 5321. But at this stage, the document contains both sets of terminology in different places. And the principle of minimal change would say that that we just leave it alone. The principle of maximum clarity says we got to make a decision and I should clean it up. And I'm agnostic between those two principles. Actually, I prefer the minimal change one because it's less work, but that's not a very good excuse.
Okay. Pete?
This is Pete Resnick. I actually would argue in favor of minimal change on what I now take to be the Crocker principle of this really hasn't screwed up anybody as far as I can tell. No one has come to us and said, what the heck does this mean or that mean? I think people get it now sufficiently that we could leave this exactly as it is and it really wouldn't affect implementation at all.
Yes, speaking as a participant, I have kind of similar feeling that even though the observation that there might be two sets of terminology used is correct, it doesn't seem to affect readability of the document. Shall I quickly close this ticket and everybody can go home? Going once. Ken wants the last word.
I have no strong opinion on what we do, but I just noticed that the proposed text that I have for the AS document with regards to enhanced status codes uses sender and receiver. So in the interest of being consistent, I assume you want to change that to be client and server. And Pete has a response.
Yeah, this is Pete. Since John said that there are still instances of both of these floating around in 5321, I think the AS could do well to clarify the meanings of these terms and you know, be explicit that 5321 uses both sets of these terms and they both mean the same, you know, they both mean the same thing, but I don't think there's any particular reason to go one way or the other in the AS. We'll pick one when we get to that, you know, discussion, but that AS is there for clarification purposes anyway. We might as well clarify in there if we're going to do it.
Yeah. Okay, hold on. Hans?
Yeah. This is Hans-Jörg. I would like to say I probably prefer sender receiver because as an SMT client for me could also be a mail user agent, sending the email. This is actually a client for me. And also like the sender SMTP still in a technical sense might be an SMTP server component. And in fact, in many situations, it is just the same piece of software fulfilling the role of a sender SMTP and a receiver SMTP. Yeah. But I agree that probably it won't have much of an influence on interpreting the RFC. But as I hear, this is also used in other contexts. Might be still worth thinking about that.
Okay, I think you're volunteering to review the whole document and point out every case where it might be better. Are you scared yet? Yes, you cannot leave the room. I will lock the door, as I said. John?
Yeah, indeed, following up on the last comment, most of the cases where where the sender and receiver terminology was introduced or reintroduced are cases where one is talking about a single piece of software acting in both capacities, and that distinction is more helpful than talking about it as the server or the client. It may not be entirely consistent that way. And the question I'd like to ask is whether people would object to simply inserting the sentence sentence equivalent to what Murray suggested into the thing, which says that in general these two things are just interchangeable. These two sets of things just interchangeable and move on. That's a clarification which really ought to be made for people reading 5321 bis and not merely in the AS.
Okay. I think that makes sense.
I just wanted to be sure that before I put it in, that there were no strong objections on the claim that it was on the basis that it was a claim that it was a change we didn't absolutely need.
Okay. Right. With this, I think we're at the end of the session. Nobody complained. Okay. Yep. I want to talk about whether we do interims or not. So, as you might or might not know, I spent probably 5 hours this week working on slides and communicating with everybody. This is taking quite a bit of time. I think it would be nice to be done. So we have email format document in working group plus call very soon. I would like to maybe have 1 or 2 interims to just nail the remaining issues. We have some of the stuff we are going to discuss on the mailing list, like the whole exciting IANA registration procedure. Then again, if this is the most exciting topic,
no, let's have an interim to discuss that.
Interim to decide the next set of tickets to discuss on the next interim. You might as well get my job then, just take it. So what do people think about interim in a month or 2?
I'd like to make a case for people actually trying to deal with these things on the mailing list to the extent possible. It is, at least for me, much easier to get text into documents based on mailing list discussions than to remember what happened in an oral discussion and transcribe from minutes. And in theory, we shouldn't be making any of these decisions without confirmation on the mailing list. So if between now and the next IETF or the next interim or the next lawn party, we can all pay more attention to the mailing list and respond to things there, make suggestions there. I think it'd be much more efficient for me, and I think for everybody else.
John, I agree, but you know, from our recent experience, obviously interims and video meetings serve as a focus point. So we do get progress on things we get stuck, and unfortunately, we sometimes get stuck on little things.
Absolutely, and it's been very clear that the interims have caused a focusing of attention and a burst of activity, which is worthwhile. I was just making a plea, and based on experience, that's the right thing to do. I was just making a plea for a change in behavior. If you are scheduled an interim and then we can accomplish a lot on the mailing list and then cancel the interim, I think that'd be great.
That would be fine with me. Pete?
Yeah, this is Pete. Just to agree with that, I would prefer you get the interim scheduled, because getting time on the calendar for a good block is sometimes tricky, and you know, getting it on the calendar, and if we have to cancel it, is way better than waiting to see if we need it and then trying to squeeze it in.
Fine. So Todd and I will try to pick a date, maybe early next week. Early next week, pick a date, you know, in a month or two, you know. No, we'll just have interims Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday next week until we get everything done. Murray.
Can you hear? Yeah, there it goes. I'll be away most of next month, so if you need anything, please let me know before then. Otherwise, I'll pick up whatever you have for me when I get back.
Okay, thank you. So with this, the meeting is closed. Any other business? Yeah, come. Is it okay.
It's a question for the draft, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
Sorry but we may defer it anyway. So when I was looking through my notes, I was thinking about what's going on here. So I understand you basically went through those two RFCs mentioned in the charter sentence by sentence and tried to figure out where there are inconsistencies or unclarities, right? Short answer.
Not
okay.
quite sentence by sentence, but yeah, well,
okay.
Some of us, yes, paid more attention to some sections than
so
others,
when thinking about SMTP, one thing that comes to my mind, which for me at least seems to be unclear in terms of overall RFC coverage, is sub-addressing. So as far as I know, sub-addressing, like these plus addresses, you should use for, or you could use in theory for, you know, doing nice things with your email. It's actually only mentioned in an RFC by this guy in front of me.
It's only in Civ, yeah, because it's.
So if we are talking about clarification of RFCs, in particular SMTP RFCs, it might be worthwhile mentioning it. I don't know. Okay.
It's a local convention, even though commonly implemented one. So it's kind of out of scope for this SMTP itself.
It was just an observation.
Okay.
And I jumped in the queue to say, if we want to put something like that in the applicability statement, we can discuss that in the context of the applicability statement, but it's definitely out of scope for SMTP.
Okay. Fine. On that note, I think we're done. Thank you for attending. Thank you for getting up early, in Dave and Murray and maybe others.
So first come, first serve wins as the most ridiculous discussion of the entire meeting. I'm happy.
Okay. Can you send me email?
Yeah, because it's not there. It's not part of SMTP. Okay. It's something that some people have rolled in, but it's not. Okay, I get the purpose of this work is to make clarification on this exchange files, but not to that. So if you start making my question is where we should go. Are you here? When you implement tomorrow. Okay. Taking any changes that we think are out of scope for this minimal effort and deferring them to another document that we have. Oh, okay. Flexibility statements are ways that you use your this is all. It's a type of document. So there are technical specifications. When you are implementing this technology. Yeah, there are some things that you consider